You know that disappointment you get when you order a pork belly and you have to fight it just to get a bite? We can't stand that. Pork belly should never be a workout for your jaw. Well, today we're gonna fix that. I'm gonna show you how I cook a pork belly that makes it so tender, it puts a Texas brisket to shame. So if you want a pork belly that literally melts in your mouth the second it hits your tongue, stick around because this is a game changer. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Joe and I'm one half of Two Crazy Ketos. Now we love pork belly. The problem is you have to cook it right to really enjoy it. And every time we go out to a restaurant and see it on the menu, we order it and we're pretty much always disappointed because it's usually really tough and chewy, and that's not how a pork belly should be. So today I'm gonna show you how I make a pork belly to make it so tender it melts in your mouth. Now we have actually made this recipe before, but it's always been buried inside of a vlog. So today we're gonna do it in a dedicated video. And this is a super easy way to cook pork belly. You don't need a lot of things and you can do it in either an oven or in a smoker, which is how we're gonna do it today. So let's go over what you're gonna need. Obviously, the first thing you're gonna need is a pork belly. Now you can buy this in a lot of your local grocery stores. We always pick them up in Costco or BJ's because you can generally get it for a really good price. This pork belly right here cost us a little bit over $40 and you're gonna get a lot of meals out of it. And you can also divide it up into sections and maybe make bacon with one half and then use the other half to cook a pork belly meal. The next thing you're gonna need is some spices for your rub, and this is pretty much up to whatever you want. The base that you're gonna need is some kosher salt, but from there, it's whatever you want. You could use salt, you could use pepper, you could add in some garlic, you can even get some Lowry's. Now for today's cook, we're gonna use 3 different ingredients for our rub, but like I said, you could use whatever you want. So we're gonna use Redmond's kosher sea salt. We're going to use some of this Pluck Seasonings Spicy Mild, and then we're also going to add in a little bit of the Redmond's Organic Garlic Pepper. So let me show you how we're gonna do this. So I'm just going to take an old shaker container that I have, and I'm gonna add in some salt. We're looking to go about 1/3, 1/3 to 1/3, maybe even a little bit less of the organic garlic pepper because there is already salt in there. Then we're going to add in some of our Pluck seasoning. And then we're gonna add in some of the garlic pepper. I don't wanna overpower it with the garlic and the pepper. I just wanna get a little bit of that flavor in there. So that looks about right. So basically what we have is we have our Pluck seasoning, and then the other half is a combination of the Redmond and the garlic pepper. We're gonna put a cover back on here and we're gonna shake it around. Now we need to prepare our pork belly, but before you do, go preheat whatever you're going to be cooking the pork belly in. For us, we're gonna be using our Recteq smoker, so I've already got that preheating to 300 degrees, but like I said, you could actually cook this in your oven in the house. Just preheat your oven to 300 degrees. So we have our pork belly here, and we're just going to take our rub, and we're just gonna cover this entire thing in a rub, and we're gonna go on both sides. Now this pork belly is actually so big, it's larger than my cutting board, but we really just wanna get a good generous coat on both sides. And then we're gonna cover the whole fat cap. Now it's really, really important to get a good coating on this fat cap because we're gonna be cooking this fat cap up. Now I know when it comes to cooking brisket, there is a big debate. Should you go fat cap up or fat cap down? And I've honestly tried both, and I prefer fat cap up because when you go fat cap down, you end up with a giant mess in your smoker. And I also find that you have a drier brisket. And I find the same thing when doing the pork belly. So we're gonna go fat cap up, and that's going to allow this fat to render down, and you're gonna get a really good tender pork belly, and then the fat is just going to melt in your mouth. Next, we need to get our temperature probe in because we need to monitor the internal temperature of the pork belly. And this is really important because we need to cook it until we get to an internal temperature of 160 degrees. At that point, we're gonna take it out and we're gonna wrap the bottoms and the sides in foil. So this is very similar to a brisket cook. For temperature probes, I like to use 2 of them. I'm gonna put one on each side of the pork belly. This way, if one side is thicker than the other, we know exactly where the temperature is. I also highly recommend using something that can go inside of your oven or your smoker and stay there. Instant read thermometers are great, the ones with the probe, but you don't want to have to keep opening up your oven or opening up the smoker to check the temperature because that can affect the cook. For us, I like to use the meter. Now there are a lot of temperature probes on the market and many smokers even have one built in, like our RecTech has one built in. So feel free to use that, but I really like using the meter for these cooks. I mean, the bottom line is we're dealing with a more expensive piece of meat. You know, if you're cooking something like a pork belly, $40, $50, briskets, well over $100, you don't want to ruin that piece of meat. And the meter does a really good job at helping you with your cook. It has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi if you get the larger block, but some of the features are really cool. For example, it is monitoring the internal temperature of the meat, but it's also monitoring the external temperature inside of your smoker or your oven, and uses different calculations to figure out about how long that cook is gonna take. And I can tell you, every time we've used it, it has been like almost spot on. It tells you exactly when you wanna remove the meat so that for the resting period, it doesn't overcook. And also it records all of your cooks, which is a really cool feature because now next time you go to cook a pork belly or a brisket or something like that, you can look in your history and it'll show you exactly how long that brisket took. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take 2 of these probes and we're gonna put 1 on each end. What you wanna do is make sure you're getting it into the meat and not the fat portion. And this is again another reason that I like to use 2 of them, so that just in case I hit the fat on one of them, we have a good idea. Now what we wanna do is come onto our meter app and set up our cook. So we're gonna go to probe number 1, we're gonna click on it, we're gonna hit set up cook. We are cooking a pork piece, and since we don't have a pork belly on here, we're gonna hit other. We're gonna tell it that we're cooking it in a smoker, and we're gonna change the temperature to 160 degrees. And hit start cook. Tells you exactly how to put in your meter probe. We can actually tell us don't show me this anymore. And then we're gonna go back to our second probe and we're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna go to pork, we're gonna go to other, and we're gonna tell it we're cooking this in a smoker and we're going to go to 160 degrees. Now we can take this and get it into the smoker, which has been preheating to 300 degrees, and get the cook started. Now, if you're wondering how long this is gonna take, remember, we always cook to temperature, not time. That's why we're using our meter probe. But on average, this part of the cook generally takes somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. Okay. So I'll lay this pork belly right here. Again, fat side up. Now that we've got the meat in there with the meter app, it's gonna begin to figure out how long this cook is gonna take. So if we look on our app, you can see how the internal temperature is 50 degrees on one of them, 53 on the other. We're going for a target temperature of 160 degrees, and right now, the ambient temperature on one side is 199, the other side is 180. And again, that is because we just opened up the lid. Once again, one of the reasons that I don't like to use that regular instant read thermometer to just constantly check it, because every time you open up that lid, you're changing the temperature in the smoker. Once this gets up and it gets set, it's gonna give us an estimate on how long this cook is going to take. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half and the meter app is saying that the pork belly is ready to come off of the heat for our next step. But I wanted to show you something on the meter app. So if you look here on the app, this is why I always recommend using 2 different probes. So if you look at probe number 1 is saying we have an internal temperature of 159 degrees, an ambient temperature of 297 with a target of 160. And it's saying remove it from the heat because the resting is going to bring it up to 160 degrees. But when we look at probe number 2, we have overshot the 160 degrees. It's at 172 degrees with an ambient temperature of 302. And this one has actually been ready for about 30 minutes. And again, that's probably because I inserted that probe number 2 into the fat cap. So that's why it's always good to use 2 different meat probes. And if you get close, then maybe that's where you wanna go out and just check with an instant read. But since we still have a second portion of the cook, I was not as concerned with having one a little bit more than the other, but you don't want to have a situation where you pull it out too early or pull it out too late. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Oh, look at that. That looks so delicious, and we're only halfway through our cook. So this looks delicious. And again, when you're looking at the pork belly, you can see how one side is a little bit thicker than the other. That's why it's, again, really important to have two different meat probes. Now, this is a fairly large pork belly, and it's just Rachel and I, so we're not gonna eat this entire thing in a sitting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna cut this in half, and we're gonna make pork burnt ends with one half, and then the other half we're gonna make as just a regular pork belly meal. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm actually just gonna find any place I want and cut it in the middle. So like right about here. And since this side looks prettier than this side, we're gonna turn this side into the burnt ends. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna push this off to the side. We're gonna cut this into little pieces and we're gonna wrap this piece. Now for the wrapping, we're gonna do something a little bit different than when we cook brisket. When we cook brisket, most of the time what we'll do is we'll use either butcher paper or aluminum foil and we'll wrap the entire thing so that it could trap the heat in. But because the pork belly is gonna cook much quicker and we really wanna get a nice crust and render on that fat on top, we're gonna leave the top exposed. And we're gonna do that by making a boat with aluminum foil. So I've got this wider aluminum foil that I picked up at Walmart, and we're just gonna pull a big sheet off. And a lot of times I like to double this up so that we don't lose any precious juices. So I'm looking at about how wide I am, and then I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna double this up. So now that I've doubled it up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna place our pork belly right in the middle. Now make sure you leave your temperature probes in because we're gonna be cooking this to an internal temperature of between 203 and 212 degrees. And I'm giving you like a wide range there because once we get to that 203 degree temperature, we're not gonna be cooking any longer to time, we're gonna be going to texture. Once we get to that 203 degree range, we're gonna take an instant read thermometer and we're gonna go out and we're gonna pierce it a couple times and see how much resistance do we have in the meat. What we wanna do is have that thing go in with absolutely no resistance. So we've got our pork belly here, and all we're gonna do is fold up the sides so that we can basically trap the heat onto the edge. So we're just gonna kind of come up, and I'm just going to basically come all the way up, and then I'm going to wrap it around on each side. And this is gonna be our end result. We basically have a boat wrapped around the pork belly, and that's gonna allow that heat to go from the bottom and the sides, but still have the top exposed to the heat inside of our smoker or our oven. Next, we're gonna work on the burnt ends. Now for the burnt ends, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this pork belly and we're gonna cut it into cubes. So I'm gonna just go lengthwise, and this could be whatever size you want. We're gonna go in what I would consider a good appetizer. So about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in thickness. And then we're gonna come back the other way. Now I should mention, at this point, this pork belly is fully cooked and ready to eat, but this is where most people stop. Again, we are going for tender, melt in your mouth pork belly. So for the burnt ends, now that we've got them cut up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a foil pan or whatever is either oven safe or safe inside of your barbecue, and we're going to put all of this into our pan. Now when you put your pork belly in the pan, make sure you put all of the juices in there as well. Next step is to take some barbecue sauce. We're gonna use this G Hughes. This is the sweet and spicy. And I've got 2 jars. We're gonna see how far we can go. But we're going to put a jar in here. We'll start with like maybe 3/4 of a jar, and then we're gonna toss this around. So we're just gonna take a wooden spoon or whatever you have and make sure that you cover all of your pork belly bites. These are some pretty big pork belly bites because I don't wanna have to sit there and cut it up. And then as they cook down, they are going to shrink a little bit. Now I feel like we're just gonna use the whole jar. So I'll put all the rest of it in here, but I don't think we're gonna need both jars. But when it comes to burnt ends, I like them to be heavily sauced. I mean, that's the whole idea about burnt ends. Now we're gonna take the pork belly and the burnt ends and put them back into the smoker or your oven, whichever one you're doing. And we're gonna go until we have an internal temperature of between 203 and 210 degrees. Okay, let's go ahead and check this. Okay, we'll check the pork belly first. So we're at perfect temperature, 208, right around there. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna poke it in a couple places and we're gonna see that everything goes very smoothly, no resistance. The only resistance is puncturing the top, which is exactly what we want. Now we're gonna check our pork belly bites. You can see how it just goes right in there. Perfect. This is all done. Look at how delicious this looks. First of all, when we look at these pork belly burnt ends, that is just beautiful. Look at that color. Oh, it smells so delicious. And then when we get over here into our pork belly brisket, it's got a beautiful crust on there. I cannot wait to dive into this. Oh, look at that. That is the most delicious looking thing ever.
Okay, judging from what I'm seeing on my plate right now, you are hoping to score tonight, to get lucky tonight.
That would be nice.
That's what I'm interpreting because this is just a big plate of my love language.
I know that Rachel loves pork belly more than ribeye,
yes,
which is hard to believe, but she does. She loves it when I make a smoked pork belly. So we've got smoked pork belly, and then we have pork belly burnt ends.
What are you doing?
So let's go ahead and try the burnt ends.
Oh, look at that.
Dink. That's delicious.
What is up? It's not even my birthday.
Okay, so now we have our pork belly itself, and this has such a nice crust on it.
It's just falling
like
apart.
A hard crust, almost like a pork skin. See, you're gonna need a knife to cut through the skin itself, even though it's just the fat, but it's just rendered so well. You didn't dink it.
Dink. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pick it up. This is what pork belly is supposed to be.
Yes.
Not that hard mess.
No, every time we go to like the Brazilian steakhouse and they bring over the pork belly, and we're always like, maybe this time they will have cooked it right. But I mean, if you just look at this, look at the way this just shreds apart. It is the most tender, most juicy pork belly you are ever going to eat.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy having like a crackling. That's what that's what this is. But to have the inside just fork tender.
Yep.
Like that is where it is at. Do not make it a hard rock.
So again, you can make this in a smoker the way we did, or you can make it in your oven. You're gonna follow the same exact directions. You're just not gonna get that smoky flavor that you're gonna get in a smoker, but you could make it in either one. Well, that's gonna be the end of today's video. Let us know down in the comments section if you make this. And also let us know what other kind of recipes you would like us to make on a smoker. Now, if you like seeing videos like this, take a look at the video we have linked right over there. Also, make sure you take a look at the most recent video that I'm gonna put right over here.
But whether you head this way or you head this way, do not forget to head this way. Subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell icon, and that way every single time I am weak in the knees, you'll be alerted to it.
Till next time.
Bye.